Okay, let's get right into it. We all hope for a peaceful end to life, right? Surrounded by the people we love, but for a lot of us, that's just not how it plays out. So today, we're going to dig into a really fascinating source that looks at how different cultures face death, and it asks a pretty powerful question. Can we find a better way to die by learning from each other?
Our source material kicks off with this really stark line. It perfectly captures this weird paradox we're living in. Thanks to medicine, we live longer than ever, but we often face the end with more fear and less peace than the generations that came before us. It really sets the stage for an important conversation.
And think about this number for a second. 50%. That's roughly how many elderly Americans still die in acute care hospitals. And that's pretty startling, especially when you find out that most people, when asked, say they'd much rather die in the comfort of their own home.
So that leads us to this central question, doesn't it? If our medical tech is so advanced, why has the whole experience of dying become so institutionalized, so stressful, and a lot of the time, so lonely? Let's unpack the historical and cultural roots of this modern problem.
First things first, we need to get a handle on the Western approach. According to the French historian Philippe Aries, who our source cites, our relationship with death wasn't always this distant. It's actually changed dramatically over the centuries.
This timeline really shows a huge shift. Back in the Middle Ages, death was a public, familiar thing. It was tamed. Then, in the Judeo-Christian era, it became thy death, this deeply personal moment tied to your destiny and God's judgment. But then, around the 19th century, it turned into forbidden death, something kind of shameful, sanitized, hidden away in hospitals, almost treated like a medical failure instead of a natural part of life.
And that brings us to today. The modern Western experience is pretty much defined by these things. Dying happens in institutions where doctors are seen as the masters of death. An individual's right to choose is held up as the absolute highest value, which can sometimes isolate them from their family. Heck, even grief itself can be medicalized if it goes on for too long.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting and really complicated. What happens when this very specific, very individualistic model of death gets applied to people who come from a completely different worldview? Well, that's where you can get a serious clash of cultures.
For elderly immigrants from East Asian cultures, this Western system can be deeply, deeply distressing. Their values, their traditions, their whole understanding of life and family, it just doesn't always line up with the rules of American bioethics. And that can lead to some real spiritual and cultural pain right when they're at their most vulnerable.
This slide really gets to the heart of the whole divide. The Western view, it's all built on what we call individual autonomy, the self as this independent little unit. But the East Asian view is founded on relational autonomy, where the self is actually defined by its relationships. In that view, family isn't just a choice you make, it's the very foundation of who you are.
Let's just pause on that for a second. You are, therefore I am. That right there is the core of the Confucian ethic. It means my identity, my very being, is inseparable from my relationships with you, my parents, my kids, my community. It's a fundamentally different way of seeing the entire world.
So let's explore this Eastern perspective a bit more. Our source compares Chinese philosophy to a concerto with 3 movements, blending Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. So it's not some single, rigid idea, but a really rich and harmonious tradition.
At the heart of Confucian thought, you've got these 2 key virtues. There's Zhen, which is all about your internal humaneness and kindness. And then there's Li, which is about the external rituals and proper behaviors that bring harmony to social life. You can think of it as a balance. Zhen is your inner compass of compassion, and Li is the social map that helps you navigate the world in a good way.
And this tradition is definitely not uniform. I mean, look at this contrast. When facing loss, Confucius expressed this deep, solemn grief. But the Taoist philosopher Chuangzi, he famously celebrated his wife's death by singing, seeing it as just a natural part of life's constant change. It just goes to show you the incredible diversity of thought within this consorto.
So what can we actually learn from all of this? Our source suggests that we can bridge this cultural divide by pulling out 3 pearls of wisdom from Confucian ethics. And these aren't just for one culture. They offer insights that could really improve end-of-life care for everybody.
So here are the 3 pearls, laid out as clear steps: embracing the family's role, encouraging personal growth through community, and understanding a different kind of spiritual immortality. Let's break each one down.
The first pearl, relational autonomy, completely reframes how we make medical decisions. So instead of a private chat between a doctor and a patient, it becomes a three-way conversation that includes the family. Why? Because when one person is sick, the entire family feels it. The goal isn't just to honor one person's choice, but to find a sense of harmony for the whole family unit.
The second pearl is about creative self-transformation. Now, this is just a beautiful idea. It suggests that finding peace and becoming your best self at the end of life, it isn't a solo journey. It happens by helping others, by strengthening your own character in relation to your community. As the source says, wishing to establish his own character also establishes the character of others.
This famous quote from Confucius is the perfect doorway into our third pearl. Sometimes Westerners use it to argue that Confucianism isn't really religious. But what it actually means is that the focus of your spiritual life should be on the here and now, on living a virtuous life, right at this moment.
And that leads us to the third pearl, a different kind of transcendence. In this worldview, immortality isn't really about an afterlife with a deity. It's achieved through the virtues you build, the legacy you leave, and the way you're remembered by your family and descendants. It provides this incredibly deep spiritual comfort by making sure that a person is never truly gone.
So, when you bring all these ideas together, how can we start moving toward a good death for everyone in our modern multicultural world? The goal is to create a new art of dying, an ars moriendi, that really respects all paths.
So what are the practical lessons here? The things we can actually do? First, involve the family. Second, understand that a quiet, stoic patient might be showing profound acceptance, not denial. Third, recognize that a person can have deep spiritual beliefs without believing in a God. And maybe most importantly, we need to acknowledge that there are many valid moral worlds out there, not just one.
At the end of the day, our source is suggesting that by looking outside our own cultural box, by drawing on the deep wisdom of traditions like Confucianism, we can rediscover and reinvent a modern art of dying well, one that's more compassionate, more connected, and more meaningful for all of us.
And that leaves us with one final, vital question to think about. In our global village, which is just filled with so many different beliefs and traditions, how can we stop seeing our differences as barriers and start seeing them as resources? Resources that can help all of us face one of life's most profound and universal experiences.